Is the era of the American superpower?
Hmm.
Is it actually reaching its breaking point? That's the huge question we're plunging into today. We've got sources stacked high here, all detailing these dramatic, what seem to be, totally unrelated geopolitical conflicts. But the analysts we're reading, they're connecting them all back to one single critical fight, this hidden war for the petrodollar.
It's not just a series of isolated crises. You have to see it as a coordinated global challenge to the entire financial architecture that's been in place since the 1970s. We're looking at reports of a failed palace coup in South America, one that was stopped by foreign technology. We're seeing 6 key nations in the Middle East suddenly form an emergency military alliance. And then there's the intelligence war with Iran, which is it's escalating faster than ever.
Okay, so let's unpack this for you. Our mission in this deep dive is to connect these things. The failed coup, those secret Chinese defense systems, the new Gulf Shield 2026, and really show you how they're all being driven by these massive underlying economic pressures. We're trying to understand why 2026 might be the year of these major global shifts. This is need-to-know stuff for anyone trying to navigate, well, the modern world.
And the thread that ties all of this together, I mean, the organizing principle for every military move, every political standoff we're about to discuss, it's this growing global resistance to the financial hierarchy that's built on the U.S. dollar.
Let's start where the action is happening right now, but maybe far from the spotlight. Venezuela. For decades, U.S. tech superiority has just been a given, right? But military experts are now looking at Venezuela, and they're sounding a pretty serious alarm. They're saying it could become a 20-year Vietnam-style trap.
And that's a really significant comparison. It's less about the size of the conflict and more about the sheer difficulty of getting a quick, decisive win. What's so critical here is how fast things changed on the ground. It's a signal that the rules of proxy warfare, they're changing.
We're seeing reports of a major reversal. A palace complex.
Yeah.
One that was, for a moment, held by U.S.-backed agents and some internal defectors. It's been retaken by the Venezuelan military. That's not just a setback. It's a complete failure to secure a key objective.
But the real insight, the thing that makes this a global story, is when you dig into why. Why did they fail to hold it? And the reports suggest the defectors just couldn't maintain air superiority over the capital. They were blind.
And that's because of the new Chinese anti-aircraft systems.
Exactly. The Venezuelan military successfully deployed these new advanced systems.
So can you elaborate on that a bit? I mean, an anti-aircraft system isn't new,
Yeah.
but a Chinese system, in this context, what does that actually mean for U.S. military reach?
It's all about denial. U.S. intervention, it relies so heavily on intelligence, on surveillance. Drones are the eyes and ears. These Chinese systems are reportedly designed specifically to counter U.S. drones, to make them less effective. So if the U.S. wants to conduct airstrikes, the cost in terms of risk, material, people, it just jumps exponentially.
So this isn't just a local fight. This success, this technology, it's effectively China and Russia drawing a very firm line in the sand. Venezuela has become a definitive proxy battleground. It's challenging U.S. military supremacy right at the level of tech.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it proves that low-cost military intervention, which has been a standard tool of foreign policy for a long time, is now a much, much riskier business. Non-Western defense tech is raising the barrier to entry for any power trying to project force thousands of miles from home. That traditional leverage the U.S. had, it's eroding fast.
Okay, that increasing risk of intervention really sets the stage. Let's pivot now to the Middle East, because it's a powder keg, and the source material suggests something even bigger is happening with old alliances. While some attention was on South America, the U.S. has reportedly been ramping up preparations for direct action against Iran.
And the crucial part is the rhetoric aimed at the Gulf monarchies. The sources describe it as incredibly blunt, an ultimatum. The U.S. administration has reportedly told them, give us your bases or face the consequences.
Wow, that's an astonishing demand. Forcing sovereign nations into a binary choice in a conflict they might want no part of.
Absolutely. And the reaction has been just as astonishing. 6 Gulf nations, led by Saudi Arabia, and critically, including the UAE, have launched Gulf Shield 2026. It's an emergency military alliance.
The UAE's inclusion is the key detail, isn't it? I mean, they've been in conflict recently over Yemen. The fact they can just put that aside to form a united front, it speaks volumes about the threat they perceive.
And this is the major insight. They're signaling directly to Washington that their sovereignty is not up for negotiation. The fear driving this is that, if they don't stand together, they could be next on the list for regime change.
So, Venezuela shows the limits of military power, and Gulf Shield shows the limits of alliance leverage. Which brings us to the big question. What's driving all this?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the one thing that connects Caracas to Riyadh. Money.
Right. This is the core economic conflict, and you really have to understand the history to get the urgency. Since the early 1970s, the U.S. has been able to sustain massive debt because the world needed the dollar to buy oil. That system is the petrodollar.
Okay, let's just pause on that for a second because it's so vital for anyone just catching up. How did that actually work? Why did it matter so much?
Think of it as artificially guaranteed demand. After the U.S. left the gold standard, it struck a deal with OPEC. Oil had to be priced in U.S. dollars, so any country, Germany, Japan, China, if they wanted to buy oil, they had to buy U.S. dollars first. This global demand basically soaked up U.S. debt and kept inflation manageable no matter how much money was printed.
And that's the crucial background. Right now, the U.S. is carrying a national debt that's, over 120% of its GDP. A debt that high is only sustainable if you have that artificial demand, if you have the petrodollar forcing the world to use your currency.
And that mechanism is now visibly crumbling. We're seeing coordinated actions challenging it. Venezuela, Russia, Iran, they are actively bypassing the dollar. They're selling large amounts of oil in Chinese yuan. This isn't just a small shift. It's an existential threat to the whole structure of the U.S. economy.
And if that core mechanism fails, the stakes are just. They couldn't be higher. If the dollar loses its reserve currency status, the U.S. could face devastating consequences. We're talking uncontrollable inflation, huge spikes in interest rates, a collapse in purchasing power for the average person.
The ability of the U.S. to fund its government, its military, at current levels would be severely, severely compromised. So the synthesis drawn by many analysts is that these military actions, the proxies in Venezuela, the pressure on the Gulf, they aren't really about democracy or stability.
So if we follow that thinking, the sources suggest these are desperate moves, attempts to enforce the old rules, to force the world back onto the dollar and, militarily stabilize the financial system that underpins American power.
That is the crucial synthesis. When the economic incentives stop working, military force becomes the last resort. The goal is to prevent the world from moving to a non-dollar-based oil trade.
Which brings us right back to Iran. It's clearly the focal point of this petrodollar defense strategy in the Middle East. And the intelligence war there has gotten incredibly sophisticated.
Yes, there's a critical piece of intelligence coming out about an alleged operation by Iran that analysts are calling the honeypot strategy. It shows frankly, an alarming level of strategic patience from Tehran.
The reports on this are incredible. The claim is that Iran allowed internal unrest across 222 locations in just 8 days to escalate. The goal wasn't just to tolerate dissent. It was to create this massive, chaotic trap to lure out deep-cover intelligence operatives.
And it worked with devastating effectiveness. Once these agents, reportedly Mossad operatives, exposed themselves by trying to fuel the unrest, Iranian security forces used that pattern of behavior for a huge, targeted crackdown.
How bad was the fallout?
It was substantial. Dozens of operatives arrested, the network dismantled, and crucially, they seized sensitive assets, weapons, advanced communication gear. This isn't just arresting spies, it's capturing the entire blueprint of the opposing intelligence network.
So the dismantling of that network has led to these immediate, highly reactive military postures from the U.S. and Israel. The big concern is obviously the sensitive information Iran now holds.
Reports detail U.S. military readiness, positioning cargo planes and helicopters near Iraq for a potential rescue operation. That tells you how valuable the captured personnel are.
And Israel's responding too, right, with heightened alert levels.
Yes. They've alerted their ground forces, which is a major move for them. There's real fear of a multi-front war, specifically surprise attacks through places like the Golan Heights.
And while all this is happening in the foreground, the nuclear clock is ticking faster and faster in the background. International reports confirm Iran is aggressively building 2 new underground complexes. They're calling them Talagon 2.
And the intensity is non-stop. They're running production lines 200/7. This round-the-clock operation is all about expanding their nuclear infrastructure and their missile stockpiles. It's a signal that their goal of achieving nuclear capacity is non-negotiable, and it's imminent.
Which brings the U.S. and Israel to this moment of profound strategic reckoning. They're facing a rapidly closing window of opportunity, aren't they?
Absolutely. The fear driving all this aggressive posturing is the timeline. If they don't act soon, Iran will achieve full nuclear capability. And once that happens, military intervention becomes almost impossible. It would grant Iran regional superpower status overnight. The balance of power would fundamentally shift.
And we are seeing that urgency reflected in the rhetoric. President Trump reportedly issued a public threat of a powerful attack if Iran doesn't agree to new deals within days. That level of pressure is immense. It signals desperation.
To really grasp the scope here, you just have to look at the map of strategic checkpoints. The U.S. has vital assets in Qatar and Bahrain, home of the Fifth Fleet. U.S. ships are gathering near Oman.
And the immediate choke point, which brings us right back to the petrodollar, is the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran blocks that strait, and they have the capability, over a fifth of the world's oil supply stops. Instantly, the global economy would go into shock. It's the ultimate escalation.
And finally, you see this strategic sprawl extending all the way to the European front. It shows just how global these commitments are. The sources report the U.S. has just released $500 million to build 2 new emergency military bases in Poland.
What's the thinking behind that investment in Poland right now?
It's designed to project strength east, to reinforce the U.S. as Europe's security guarantor and counter Russia. But this focus in Poland is kind of contrasted by some confusing signals, like these strange threats regarding Greenland, of all places.
It really feels like the America's strategic focus is stretched incredibly thin, trying to stabilize Europe, enforce economic order in the Middle East, and confront tech challenges in South America all at once.
That's precisely it. The global map is showing severe strain across 3 major theaters, and it's all fundamentally connected by the vulnerability of the dollar system.
Okay, let's circle back and synthesize all this for you. When you look across everything we've discussed, a clear pattern emerges. You have the direct challenges to U.S. military reach in Venezuela. You have the unprecedented pushback from traditional allies in the Middle East with Gulf Shield 2026, and under it all, this core existential threat to the global demand for the dollar.
The system that's maintained global financial stability for 5 decades is now under immense pressure from multiple angles. Whether it's through intelligence wars, proxy conflicts with new tech, or economic defections to the yuan, the goal of these nations is clear: to decentralize global financial power.
So we've laid out all the pieces on the geopolitical chessboard. What's the final provocative thought you should take away as you look at the world of 2026?
Look, we are witnessing a monumental moment, a moment where 2 defining scenarios are battling for dominance. Are we watching the last stand of a superpower, one that's desperate to militarily enforce the economic order that has served it for 50 years? Or is this the messy, complex, and maybe inevitable beginning of a transition to a truly new, decentralized, and non-dollar-centric global order? The actions we see in the coming months will tell us which path we are truly on.